This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Emerging markets are now looking ahead to central bank meetings as coronavirus cases continue to rise globally. MSCI's index of emerging market stocks falling 0.4% today. We saw South Africa's JSE ending a 4-day winning streak as stalling U.S. stimulus talks weighed on sentiment. Resources were down 1.38% and gold miners were down 3.69%. They both dragged the all-share down 8% today. In Egypt, the EGX 30 retreated about 1%, extending losses for a 6th straight session, as of course Egyptians prepare to vote for a new parliament. Now also coming up on today's show. The African Export-Import Bank to raise up to $5 billion for the purchase of COVID-19 vaccines for Africa. The International Monetary Fund sees sub-Saharan Africa contracting by 3.2% this year. And the cafe in Uganda that's enabling people with hearing impairment to serve. Well, our starting point tonight is the African Export-Import Bank. It is set to raise up to $5 billion for the purchase of COVID-19 vaccines for African nations. The African Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says that Africa needs to be proactive in the race to secure vaccines for the coronavirus that has infected more than 41 million people globally. Now, COVAX, which is a global COVID-19 vaccine allocation plan co-led by the World Health Organization, will only be able to secure shots for less than 10% of the continent's population of about 1.29 billion. The allocation plan is designed to lower prices and discourage national governments from hoarding COVID-19 vaccines. It also aims to help purchase and fairly distribute at least 2 billion doses of approved vaccines by the end of 2021. Well, let's move on now. The Nigerian President, Muhammadu Buhari, is at this moment giving a televised national address in response to the anti-police protests that, of course, have caught the attention of the world. Let's listen in.
Concerns and agitations of members of the public regarding the excessive use of force by some members of SARS. The choice to demonstrate peacefully is a fundamental right of citizens as enshrined in Section 40 of our Constitution and other enactments. But this right to protest also imposes on the demonstrators the responsibility to respect the rights of other citizens and the necessity to operate within the law. As a democratic government, we listened to and carefully evaluated the 5-point demands of the protesters. And having accepted them, we immediately scrapped SARS and put measures in place to address the other demands of our youth. On approving the termination of SARS, I already made it clear that it was in line with our commitment to the implementation of extensive police reforms. Sadly, the promptness with which we have acted seemed to have been misconstrued as a sign of weakness and twisted by some for their selfish, unpatriotic interests. The result of this is clear to all observers. Human lives have been lost, acts of sexual violence have been reported, 2 major correctional facilities were attacked and convicts freed, public and private properties completely destroyed or vandalized, the sanctity of the palace of a peacemaker, the Oba of Lagos, has been violated. So-called protesters have invaded an international airport and in the process disrupted the travel plans of fellow Nigerians and our visitors. All this executed in the name of the End SARS protests. I am indeed deeply pained that innocent lives have been lost. These tragedies are uncalled for and unnecessary. Certainly, there is no way whatsoever to connect these bad acts to legitimate expression of grievance of the youth of our country. The spreading of deliberate falsehood and misinformation through the social media in particular, that this government is oblivious to the pains and plight of the citizens is a ploy to mislead the unwary within and outside Nigeria into unfair judgment and disruptive behavior. On the contrary, both our deeds and words have shown how committed this administration has been to the well-being and welfare of citizens, even with the steadily dwindling revenues and the added responsibilities and restrictions due to the coronavirus pandemic. Government has put in place measures and initiatives principally targeted at youth, women, and the most vulnerable groups in our society. These included our broad plan to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in the next 10 years. The creation of 75 billion Naira National Youth Investment Fund to provide opportunities for the youth and the micro, small, and medium enterprises survival fund, through which government is A, paying 3 months' salaries of the staff of the 100,000 micro, small, and medium enterprises. B, paying for the registration of 250,000 businesses at the Corporate Affairs Commission. C, giving a grant of 30,000 Naira to 100,000 artisans. And D, guaranteeing market for the products of traders. These are in addition to many other initiatives, such as A, farmer money, B, trader money, C, market money, D, N-Power, E, N-Tech, and F, N-Agro. No Nigerian government in the past has methodically and seriously approached poverty alleviation like we have done. With regards to the welfare of police personnel, the National Salaries, Income and Wages Commission has been directed to expedite action on the finalization of the new salary structure of the members of the police force. The emoluments of other paramilitary services are also being reviewed upwards. In order to underscore the importance of education in preparing youth for the future, this administration has come up with a new salary structure and other incentives for our teachers. Let me at this point reaffirm the federal government's commitment to preserving the unity of this country. We will continue to improve good governance and our democratic process, including through sustained engagement. We shall continue to ensure that liberty and freedom, as well as the fundamental rights of all citizens, are protected. But remember that government also has the obligation to protect lives and properties, as well as the right of citizens to go about their daily businesses freely and protected from acts of violence. To our neighbors in particular, and members of the international community, many of whom have expressed concern about the ongoing development in Nigeria, we thank you and urge you all to seek to know all the facts available before taking a position or rushing to judgment and making hasty pronouncements. In the circumstances, I would like to appeal to protesters to note and take advantage of the various well-thought-out initiatives of this administration designed to make their lives better and more meaningful, and resist the temptation of being used by some subversive elements to cause chaos with the aim of truncating our nascent democracy. For you to do otherwise will amount to undermining national security and the law and order situation. Under no circumstances will this be tolerated. I therefore call on our youth to discontinue the street protests and constructively engage government in finding solutions. Your voice has been heard loud and clear, and we are responding. And I call on all Nigerians to go about their normal businesses and to enjoin security agencies to protect lives and properties of all law-abiding citizens without doing harm to those they are meant to protect. Let me pay tribute to officers of the Nigeria Police Force who have tragically lost their lives in the line of duty. I would like to thank those state governors, traditional and religious leaders who have appealed for calm and restraint. I also thank youth leaders who have restrained their followers from taking the law into their hands. This government respects and will continue to respect all the democratic rights and civil liberties of the people, but it will not allow anybody or groups to disrupt the peace of our nation. Thank you all. God.
Of course, that was President Muhammadu Buhari in his first address in response to the anti-police protests that have shaken the country and caught the attention of the world in recent days. Well, let's move on now. The Africa CDC has warned that a second wave of COVID-19 infections is looming. The health body said the number of new cases is on the rise. Now, the head of the Africa CDC, John Nkengasong, cited failure to implement preventative measures amongst the contributing factors to those rising cases. Here's CGTN's Girim Chala with more.
The virus that has already killed more than 1 million people across the world is resurging. Many nations are already considering a second closure of their borders. The Africa CDC says a second wave of COVID-19 on the continent looks inevitable. New cases have risen by an average of 4% over the last 4 weeks.
We believe that we should prepare actively for a potential second wave of the continent if the trends we are observing are maintained. That is, we're calling for continuous strong political leadership that will allow us to implement the following public health measures: increase and universal masking, scaling up of diagnostics, make sure that we engage the community so that the community own the response.
Dr. Nkengasong said many are mistakenly treating the coronavirus as just another flu.
We're dealing with a virus that is spreading extremely fast. Again, as I indicated earlier, the world has recorded 40 million cases of COVID-19 in 10 months. And it took us close to 40 years for us to get to about 80 million infections with HIV. So this is a virus that spreads extremely quick.
In Africa, more than 1.6 million cases have been reported so far. That is just over 4% of global cases. Across the continent, 40,000 people have died from COVID-19, while over 1.3 million people have recovered. Dr. Nkengasong says African states have increased their testing capacity, vital to control the spread of the virus.
The total number of tests reporting, that is cumulated number of tests since the start of this pandemic in Africa, is recorded at 17 million. To be very specific, 17,500,000 tests. This represents an 8.8% increase over the last week. So if you compare last week to this week, we've noticed close to 9% increase.
But it is not all gloomy in the continent, and according to Africa CDC, some countries, especially those in Western Africa and Central Africa, are registering significantly lowered number of new cases. For instance, the Central African Republic, 39% decrease, Gambia, 36% decrease, and Madagascar, 31% decrease. Experts say it is still possible to win the battle against the COVID-19 pandemic. Grumchara, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Well, let's now turn our attention to the IMF's latest report on Africa. The International Monetary Fund sees sub-Saharan Africa contracting by 3.2% this year. That is slightly lower than the 3% contraction it had projected in June. In its latest World Economic Outlook report, the international lender notes that the projection remains subject to downside risks, especially regarding the path the pandemic takes. Now, Director of the IMF's African Department, Abebe Selassie, says that policymakers must balance the need to boost their economies against the need for debt sustainability. The priority, however, remains saving lives.
On the economic front, as we've been reporting for the last several months, the pandemic really has been quite devastating to the region. In just a few months, the crisis has jeopardized years of hard-won development gains and upended the lives and livelihoods of millions of people in the region. Regional activity dropped abruptly and quite sharply in the second quarter. In more recent weeks, we've seen a cautious reopening of economies and more of a forward-looking policy posture to ignite growth. And with the loosening of containment measures, somewhat higher commodity prices, and the easing of financial conditions, there are tentative signs of a recovery in the second half of 2020.
Well, Giles Gibson now joins us in Washington with more on that IMF briefing. Giles, good to see you as always. Now, of course, the IMF is saying that the pandemic has been devastating to the sub-Saharan African region, but they also do see tentative signs of a recovery as soon as the second half of this year. Give us a sense of what sort of tone that this latest report struck, especially about the region's outlook.
Well, the title of this latest report from the IMF was A Difficult Road to Recovery. And that really reflects just the really tough times that we've been seeing in economies in sub-Saharan Africa in 2020. And the IMF saying that commodity exporting economies have been struggling almost as much as economies in the region that depend on tourism. And that's why they are forecasting that the region's economy and the region's GDP will shrink by just over 3% in 2020. The IMF will also see some significant risks looming on the horizon for the region, including just how this COVID-19 pandemic is going to play out in the next sort of 3, 6 or 9 months. And really a central theme of these annual meetings this year in Washington, these virtual annual meetings that we've been having, is this plea really to world leaders, to countries, to work together to try to fight this pandemic. For example, urging countries that if a vaccine is successfully developed, that vaccine should get to every single country at an affordable price.
Now, according to this report, the IMF says that the region could face a financing gap of $290 billion US, and that's between 2020 and 2023. Now, given the slowdown that Africa is seeing in private capital flows, and of course the obstacles that the continent has faced in terms of receiving debt relief, how does the IMF propose that governments in the region plug that gap?
Well, of course, you know the old saying that you should never let a good crisis go to waste. And the IMF certainly see this as an opportunity to encourage countries in the sub-Saharan Africa region to bring in a whole long list of reforms. They talked about better governance, more financial regulation for banks, digitalization as well. But there is also a recognition from the IMF here in Washington that the region can't do it alone. The IMF, of course, has already pumped in $17 billion of support into the region so far during 2020. And the IMF also saying that without significant additional assistance, many countries will struggle to meet the basic needs of their people.
Well, many thanks, Giles, for that update. That, of course, is Giles Gibson joining us there in Washington, D.C. Well, let's take a look at some corporate headlines now. South Africa's largest chain of retail pharmacies, Clicks, saw group headline earnings grow about 12.2% for the year ending August. This is after boycotts over a Trezem advert in the second week of September. Now, trade has since returned to normal, with sales growing by almost 10% to $2.12 billion. And coronavirus-fueled demand for hygiene products and comfort foods is helping Unilever and other consumer product giants bounce back from years of sluggish growth. Unilever shares gained about 1.2% in early London trading today. The maker of Lifebuoy soap reported a 4.4% increase in underlying sales. Procter & Gamble and Lysol Reckitt Beckinser Group have also seen an increase in revenue throughout 2020. Meanwhile, ExxonMobil plans to lay off an unspecified number of employees. The job cuts are just the latest sign of a struggle amongst U.S. energy producers who are navigating the industry's worst downturn in recent memory. The company was forced to slash its capital spending budget by a third, or $10 billion, while its stock plunged 52% this year. And finally, British Airways owner IAG has reported a $1.54 billion third quarter loss. The loss was far larger than the $1.09 billion forecast by analysts. As a second wave of COVID-19 infection spreads across Europe, airlines are facing a bleak winter. The firm says that for the fourth quarter, it will fly no more than 30% of its capacity, which it flew a year earlier. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's head into a short break now. Still to come on the show. Uganda's parliament approves close to $70 million to rebuild roads in the eastern part of DRC. And Egypt to invest $2 billion in green projects this financial year.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Now let's head to Uganda. The country's parliament has approved close to $70 million to rebuild roads in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now this follows a recent bilateral agreement which was signed between Uganda and the DRC to boost trade relations. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reports.
Uganda is set to help rebuild strategic roads in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The 223-kilometer road project is a joint venture between Uganda and the DRC.
We are going to do those roads because we are getting from Congo, I think we are earning $500 million a year. How can you see, how can you even speak? Why are you building the road? If my neighbor has allowed me, I'm getting a lot of advantages from him.
Uganda exports cement, steel and agricultural products to the DRC. Most of the roads that connect Uganda to the DRC markets are impassable. Traders are being forced to take the longer route through Rwanda. But the recent impasse between Uganda and Rwanda that led to the closure of borders is forcing the Kampala government to look for alternative ways to reach consumers in the region. The Uganda-Rwanda border crossing at Katuna has been closed for almost 2 years now. And as Uganda and the DRC move to pave new access roads, civil society activists want the authorities to be more transparent about the project.
They must work out a balance sheet so that they are able to talk with facts that actually this is what we are investing, this is what we expect actually to reap from this investment, this is the period within which we expect to reap, and these are the advantages that come with this.
However, local authorities say the revamped roads in the DRC will also encourage development in Uganda.
The roads we are taking to Congo are to make business, which will enable us to get more resources to deal with the roads.
Uganda is contributing 20% of the total cost of the $334 million project, with the DRC's government guaranteeing the rest. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And heading to Egypt now, the country has announced that it will invest about $2 billion in green projects during the current financial year. This is as it scales up its efforts to improve the environment and cut on pollution. The plan will see some 691 green projects worth over $36 billion receive funding and follow a successful launch of its first. And this follows a successful launch of its first $750 million green bond last week. CGTN's Yasser Akim reports.
Green projects are the future. In a bid to achieve this objective, Cairo has set an ambitious goal that will see the government dedicate 30% of its investment budget to green projects in 2021-2022. It's an aggressive policy by the government to allocate a significant portion of its budget to this sector. But why the focus on green projects?
Green projects are the ones that implement the environmental conditions during planning, execution, and also during production. Green projects are not only environmental projects, they are any project that adheres to the environmental aspects in its construction and operation. The government has given priority to projects that will protect and make use of our vast natural resources such as lakes, coastlines, natural reserves, and more. We will also focus on fixing projects that usually emit a lot of pollution to become environmentally friendly.
The first sectors to benefit from this new approach are renewable energy, waste management, and clean transportation. For the first time, Egypt has floated $750 million worth of green bonds on the London Stock Exchange. It was oversubscribed 3 times. This money will be part of a $1.9 billion funding allocated for this year's projects.
The global trend now is to give more attention to the environmental issues in all industries and aspects of the economy, and the international financial institutions have joined in as well. If we look at it from an economical angle, most of the global investors and funds are now opting for new rules and conditions to ensure environmental adherence before investing in any project. Our new environmental awareness approach will certainly help in increasing foreign investment opportunities in Egypt and guarantee more economic rewards.
It's a new venture with a lot of rewards, but it comes with its own unique challenges.
There are challenges because you're changing the technique of operations and the technology in these projects. Most sectors are willing to join. However, mining and industries, for example, have to change their sources of energy from coal, for instance, to clean energy. This needs higher budgets and willingness from the related ministries to support them to make the changes.
Green projects now account for 14% of the government's investment budget. The North African country plans to spend 100% of its investment budget on green projects in 3 years' time. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
You are watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a quick break now. Still to come on the show. Chinese Vice Premier Liu He praises the country's decision to contain the pandemic before restoring its economy. And ever desired to play a new musical instrument? Now you can make your body that instrument.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Now let's recap other headlines at this time. The World Health Organization says the rollout of new rapid diagnostic tests could be a game changer in Africa's fight against the coronavirus. While infections have plateaued in most countries on the continent, the virus is still a threat to humans. Now, the WHO aims to provide better testing access to areas where it's harder to reach. And gunshots were heard on Thursday as smoke billowed over a prison in central Lagos, Nigeria, in the upscale Ikoyi neighborhood. It was not immediately clear who attacked the prison facility. The incident comes amid 2 weeks of widespread protest against police brutality. Some protesters broke a round-the-clock curfew imposed on Tuesday after soldiers were accused of opening fire on protesters in Lagos. And still in Nigeria, police report 20 people have been killed by a group of gunmen in Zamfara state. The attack took place in Tunga Kwana village in northwestern Nigeria. Now, police spokesperson said bandits targeted residents who they suspect are informants for security agencies in the area. And in Kenya, a court has ordered an investigation into the abduction of an acquitted terror suspect. Liban Abdullahi Omar went missing a day after he was found not guilty of supporting the 2013 Westgate shopping mall attack. And that is a recap of today's top headlines. Let's turn our attention to China's economy now. Chinese Vice Premier Liu He said on Wednesday that the country's decision to contain the pandemic before restoring its economy was, in quotes, perfectly right. He was speaking at the Financial Street Forum in Beijing. He said that it's highly probable that China will register positive growth this year. That's because key economic indicators are improving quarter by quarter. Liu also added that the Chinese economy is witnessing some new trends that include more emphasis on new industries and additional attention to green development. Liu also reiterated China's determination to advance an all-round opening up of its economy. Now, China's economic recovery continues attracting reactions from the continent. Economist Johan Els says speedy recovery will help boost economies of emerging countries such as South Africa.
China's still by far the second biggest economy in the world. And in a country like South Africa, for instance, where we're heavily dependent on commodity prices and commodity exports, the strengthening in the Chinese economy not only helps us or other emerging economies, but it helps the US, it helps the other big areas like the Euro area as well. And we can see this coming through in terms of trade statistics, where not only Chinese exports have been performing well, but more recently imports have been picking up as well. And that's in line with the better economic growth in China. So it's that one tide that lifts all boats. So yeah, it's particularly encouraging that China is supportive to the rest of the world.
Well, let's move on now to the U.S., where the Federal Reserve said the country's economy continues to recover, but the picture was uneven across the board. Now, Wednesday's Beige Book report showed that the Fed districts characterized their outlooks as generally positive, though with a considerable degree of uncertainty. The report noted that the recovery was proceeding on separate tracks, with manufacturing and consumer spending showing growth and commercial real estate remaining weak. However, the latest report was more upbeat than the September edition. Now, of course, the election has brought to the surface deep divisions in the U.S. on major issues from COVID-19 to the economy. Race relations has also been quite a hot topic in the country, and it goes well beyond politics, creating divisions between families and friends as well. CGTN's Jim Spellman with more on that.
With just days to go before the U.S. election, the country is divided over just about everything.
It's no longer about what America needs, what Americans need. It's now, well, this is what the Democrats will do, or this is what the Republicans will do. And I no longer hear any rhetoric about America or Americans as a whole.
A recent Associated Press NORC poll finds an overwhelming majority of registered voters think the U.S. is deeply polarized.
We saw that a large number of people, more than 80%, think that the country is very divided on important issues.
Issues like COVID-19, the Supreme Court, the economy, and perhaps most pronounced, issues around race. Progressive activists blame President Trump.
When America elected the first African-American president twice, you saw a degree of unity and coming together in America. But after that, there was this backlash, and Donald Trump and his following have fully exploited it. We've not seen this kind of division in America, I believe, since the Civil War.
Trump defends his actions and accuses Democrats of sowing division.
The left is attempting to destroy that beautiful vision and divide Americans by race in the service of political power.
The AP poll found Americans think Joe Biden has a slightly better chance of uniting the country.
Today, once again, we are a house divided. But that, my friends, can no longer be. We are facing too many crises. We have too much work to do.
But even on this question of unity, Americans are divided.
It's not surprising that Biden supporters think that Biden would be better at uniting the country, and Trump supporters think that Biden would not be good at uniting the country.
These deep divisions make many skeptical that change will come.
When we're at this level of polarization, there's going to be very little space for solutions.
And for some, it's become deeply personal, dividing families and friends.
I have very good friends that we still talk, and they know how I feel and I know how they feel, but it just seems like no matter what I say, she's not going to change, and no matter what they tell me, I'm not going to change.
And polarization is eroding trust in the American system. That Associated Press poll found that nearly half of Americans say democracy is not working well or at all. And at least 8 in 10 Americans say if their candidate loses, it would further weaken the way government runs. Jim Spellman, CGTN, Rockville, Maryland.
Meanwhile, U.S. pharmaceutical company Purdue Pharma has pled guilty to criminal charges over the handling of its addictive prescription opioid, OxyContin. Now, prosecutors imposed significant penalties exceeding $8 billion against Purdue, though the lion's share will go largely unpaid. It agreed to pay $225 million towards a $2 billion criminal forfeiture, with the Justice Department foregoing the rest.
The global settlement announced today involves the company pleading guilty to 3 felony counts for defrauding the United States and violating the anti-kickback statute from 2009 to 2017. In addition to the company having agreed to plead guilty to these 3 felony counts, the company has agreed to a $3.544 billion criminal fine and a $2 billion criminal forfeiture amount. Further, on top of those, to resolve its civil liability, Purdue Pharma has agreed to $2.8 billion in damages to the United States. Now, the company's in bankruptcy, so the corporate resolution is subject to the bankruptcy court's approval. If it's approved, this will be a corporate settlement in total of more than $8.3 billion.
Well, let's head to the UK now, where nightclubs are facing an uncertain future as virus restrictions and lockdowns take their toll on the traditional night out. Some clubs are finding ways to remain open in a reduced capacity, where others have remained closed since March.
Today, customers are returning to nightclubs for a night out, perhaps not as we remember. Vinyl in Cambridge reopened less than 2 weeks ago, but everything is different as clubs attempt to comply with new government measures. Stephen Taylor, the club's manager, says he's never seen a night out quite like this.
There's no dancing, table service only, controlled social distancing, programmed of people on their arrival, so there's no queuing outside, because we had to be fully aware of not just social distancing within inside the building, but also outside.
Clubs in the city can only accept bookings of 6 people. Everybody must scan their phones to use the government's Track and Trace app to measure infections. What's more, masks must be worn at all times inside the club unless you have a medical exemption, and there can be no mingling with people outside of your party. Crucially, there's no dancing, and everybody needs to be out by 10 p.m. A night out clubbing now starts at 6 p.m. Social distancing requirements mean Vinyl can no longer operate at its 700-person capacity. Vinyl is not alone. Fabric is a large nightclub which can host more than 2,000 people and specializes in underground electronic music. Luke Laws is the operations director and works on site to keep the building maintained and plan for the future.
Devastating. And to go to zero income, I mean, notwithstanding 3 film shoots, which are not great money at the moment, you're not covering your costs at all. It's just pure cash burn.
According to the Nighttime Industries Association, nightlife in the UK, including clubs, bars, music events and restaurants, traditionally make a revenue of nearly $870 billion each year and employs 1.3 million people. It is a large and important sector of the economy that is suffering particularly hard through the pandemic. The light at the end of the tunnel seems a long way away, since many insiders are not hopeful of reopening their clubs until late 2021 to early 2022.
Meanwhile, the pandemic has forced restaurants to step things up and in some cases literally take things to new heights. While the owner of a Michelin star restaurant in Hungary offered guests a fine dining experience on the Budapest Eye, a Ferris wheel overlooking the city skyline.
Costa's restaurant in Budapest hosted a dining event last weekend, showing that restaurants are continuously looking for ways to make eating out safe during the pandemic. Owner Carolee Gerendai says the idea of the socially distanced dinner service came to him after noticing customer flow at one of his restaurants was only at a tenth of pre-lockdown levels.
When tourism was in full swing, there was no point stopping the wheel for such an event because there were always lots of people on it. But now that there are not many people either on the wheel or in the restaurant, the opportunity arose for us to carry out this idea. The Ferris wheel is ideal with its separate cabins to ensure separate seatings for guests.
A 4-course meal on the famed Ferris wheel costs around $155 per person. The dining event was sold out within days as locals sought a rare escape from coronavirus restrictions.
I think it's important to be safe, but I think having fun is essential to your life as well. But under this circumstance where it's an enclosed area with people that are close to you, then I think it's okay.
The owner of Costa's restaurant is planning to repeat the event when warmer weather arrives in the spring, hoping to draw in more customers and provide them with a new dining experience. Lin, CGTN.
Now, a German startup is set to revolutionize music through the use of technology. The company's wearable wristbands allow you to turn your body into a musical instrument. Whether you are a dance or music enthusiast, when it comes to the body instrument wristbands, it doesn't matter how you get down. CGTN's Terry Wangari with the story.
Music enthusiasts have one more thing to be excited about. A Zurich-based startup has invented a wearable device that turns your whole body into a musical instrument.
So you've got your right wristband, your left wristband, and all you need is your trusty smartphone. Let's go.
Every wave of the hand or move of the body can now be a unique sound with the help of Mictic's wearable wristbands. The system works by strapping 2 bands on your wrists or ankles, pair them with a smartphone app, select an instrument or genre, and hear your movement translated into sound of any genre you fancy.
You can do hip-hop, you can do electronic, you can do a rock band, whatever floats your boat. I'll give you one that I like. It's a hip-hop world. Let's go and trigger that. Yeah. So for example, my left hand controls when I want the beat to come in. For example, 2, 3, 4. And then my right hand is free to add accents. Like scratch, go over here, trigger synth. You get all sorts of different sounds. Let me shut it up. Bam. All sorts of different experiences that you can have as you move around with the radius of this product. That's just one example.
The tech company claims Mictic's sensor and the smartphone app combined have a latency of only 24 milliseconds. This means there's practically no delay between movement and sound.
naturally, yes. I mean, look, we're a group of musicians, so we have a lot of fun with it, but we see it for the everyday user, right? The people that want to create, want to have a way of expressing themselves. This is a fantastic product for that. We're having a lot of fun with it. We expect others to as well.
Mictic is currently taking pre-orders for the wristbands priced at $109. This device is believed to be the first wearable gear that allows anyone to truly immerse themselves in music. Whether they are a serious musician or just want to have fun. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
And on that note, let's take a look at commodity markets now. Oil prices ticking up today, but they did struggle to fully recover from earlier losses. A rise in U.S. inventories signaled a warning outlook for fuel demand as coronavirus cases soar. Meanwhile, a stronger dollar has taken some shine off gold. We saw prices falling from a more than 1 week high yesterday. That's after the dollar recovered some lost ground following growing doubts that an agreement on a new U.S. coronavirus aid package could be reached before the election. Well, let's head into a quick break now, still to come. Truly, there are no obstacles when it comes to service. We look at a cafe in Uganda that has engaged the hearing impaired.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN. See the difference.
Well, let's head to Uganda, where Ndiro Coffee recently launched its first sign language cafe in the country. The unique cafe aims to empower people with hearing impairments in the East African nation. CGTN's Cham Gono with their story.
This is Ndiro Coffee, a sign language cafe located in the Ugandan capital, Kampala. All of the staff have a hearing impairment and communicate using sign language. It's the first cafe of its kind in the city.
When the world sees a person with a disability or people with hearing impairments, they think those people depend on others. They think persons with disability cannot work on their own. But the first customers, in the first week, we started showing interest. They didn't know sign language, but they tried.
Customers communicate with the staff by writing down their orders.
You find a little sticky note tin with a pen in it. You also do get a form on top of the menu, so whatever I guess tickles your fancy and how you want to order. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward. You just write it down.
According to the Ugandan Health Ministry, over 2 million Ugandans suffer a degree of hearing loss.
My dream is to see deaf people empowered, economically empowered through coffee. I believe this business is going to give deaf people jobs as we expand.
The cafe opened its doors to customers last month and has ensured that COVID-19 safety precautions are well observed.
We're all struggling in this period, but by brewing all the good we can, we're offering great opportunity for the vulnerable community to, get leadership, get opportunities to work. So yes, so bold move, but bring all the good you can requires bold moves.
Ndiro Coffee hopes to create more intimate spaces like this one across Uganda. Chamgono, CGTN.
Now, a lot of artists are starting to showcase unique bodies of work that they produced during the lockdown period. Most of them use the lockdown to capture this unprecedented time in history and also draw on the sense of fear, loneliness and isolation that has been felt across board. In Johannesburg, South Africa, at the Everard Reed Gallery, artist Wayne Barker is showcasing an exhibition called Love Light in the Time of Corona. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
Packed with symbolism, history, innuendo, and pop culture, this exhibition is a critical reminder of the complexities of emptiness and offers a glimmer of salvation in the collective humanity. That's according to the exhibiting artist Wayne Barker. Barker is showcasing a body of work themed Love Light in the Time of Corona.
You know, I'd been invited to have a residency in Paris, and the lockdown happened. And suddenly I packed up my whole massive big studio, and I was left with very little material in my apartment studio. So the first thing I started doing was just painting lilies, and thinking about lilies and light. And then over time, with the limited material that I had, I thought, well, the social distancing, suddenly you can't see your friends, you can't see anybody. And the angst that I think everyone went through, no one knew what the hell is going on.
Barker says during this pandemic time, he has shifted his focus away from his critical, broader observations on society at large and began to paint portraits of the people around him.
These portraits speak to the private moments, the fears and the uncertainties, but they also speak to the strength of humankind.
So the portraits came out of a very intense, I'm quite a prolific artist. I work a lot. Doesn't all end up in museums or galleries or whatever, but it's like healing in a way. I find the process of art making incredibly healing for the self.
The exhibition also reflects on the fact that the whole world has been permanently altered in the last 6 months as a result of the need to curb the spread of COVID-19. And yet, the fundamental needs of human beings remain unchanged.
I was actually reflecting my own angst and quite a lot of things. Like, I was thinking about the world, about, ownership, about suddenly you're left with basically nothing. And you're there, sure, you can shop, you can do the very basic things. And it was an interesting journey to see what is actually important in one's life. Like, it doesn't matter if you've got a massive mansion, you're not going to be able to, you know what I mean? Like, or the big car, or whatever.
Barker is well known for his bold, critical, social and political commentary. The exhibition is on display until the end of October. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And before we leave you, a quick look at Africa's currencies today. South Africa's rand on track for its 5th day of gains as investors' focus remains on U.S. stimulus talks. But of course, analysts are saying the rand's movements are due to dollar weakness rather than rand strength as markets look to global prospects for short-term guidance at the moment. Meanwhile, Nigeria's naira weakening slightly on the parallel market. It closed at 461 naira per dollar, and that is as activity slowly picks up again following the NSAS protest in the past week. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.